Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and thank him for his leadership, working with Congressman Walter Jones on this bipartisan amendment which has been brought to the floor. They have worked, again, in a bipartisan way, in a patriotic way, to ensure that U.S. troops are brought home from Afghanistan safely and expeditiously. Listening to the debate, it's interesting because I don't know that we're that far off because we all want to ensure the national security of our country. We all respect our men and women in uniform and the job that they are doing to keep us the land of the free and the home of the brave. We respect them when they come home as our veterans. But we have to know that involvement of nearly 10 years has serious consequences to our country. I have told the President of Afghanistan on my recent visit this spring that each time I go there I say the American people are growing tired of war. We're weary of war. We went into Afghanistan in the fall of 2001. For about 7 years, there was no plan. There was no plan on how we would execute what we went to do and how we would leave. When President Obama became president, many of us who were eager for us to bring our troops home gave him a chance to put forth a plan, which he did, which calls for a drawdown of troops this July 2011 and terminating in drawing down more completely 2014. President Obama himself has said earlier this month, I've already made a commitment that starting in July of this year, we are drawing down troops and we are transitioning. We are training our forces so they can start securing their own country. The Afghans can secure their own country. The President went on to say, we don't need to have a perpetual footprint of the size we have now. And so therefore, I think it's really important for us to know what this amendment does that I think reflects the mood of the American people. Within 60 days of enactment, a plan and time frame for the accelerated transition of military and security forces to the government of Afghanistan. In 60 days, we want to see a plan. Within 60 days of enactment, a plan and time frame for negotiations leading to a political solution and reconciliation in Afghanistan. A plan within 60 days. Within 90 days of enactment, a national intelligence estimate on leadership, location, and capabilities of al-Qaeda and affiliated networks and cells. Who can be against that? Who can be against that? We're talking about 60 days a plan, 60 days a plan, 60 days a negotiation. I appreciate the efforts that this amendment, as it underscores the importance of having a plan and a time frame for a transition of responsibility, but that's all negotiated, a transition of responsibility for security and stability to the Afghans so that we can bring our troops home. The national intelligence estimate on al-Qaeda that is called for in the plan will also help ensure our policymakers that they have updated information on the threat posed by al-Qaeda and affiliates who remain a threat even following the death of Osama bin Laden. Careful intelligence analysis is essential to keeping the American people safe. So as I salute our men and women in uniform, I also want to salute in the intelligence community who are an important part of keeping the American people safe, and I commend them and CIA Director Panetta for his leadership in the capture of Osama bin Laden. But back to this specific point of this amendment. I've gone there year after year after year, never thinking that we would be engaged in the longest war in America's history. First 7 years, not even a plan. And now the President has put into motion how we make judgments about how we stay and how we leave. If you visit the women in Afghanistan, as many women in the Congress have done, and some of our male colleagues as well, they will tell you, whether you're talking about educated women in Kabul, but really more relevant to me, poor women in the provinces. I visited a group of women in the province of Zabul. I visited a number of provinces and spoken to the women there. And the women there say, we really want to educate our daughters. We want to have access to health care clinics and the rest. But we can't have that until we have security. And we can't have security until we end corruption. So there are many things going on in Afghanistan that must change. And there will be a better chance of their changing if we make an investment in the civilian side of this transition, whether it's diplomacy, whether it's part of the construction. They tell me not to say reconstruction because not much was there before. Construction there, whether it's building schools. We visited little girls in school in different parts of Afghanistan. It's very encouraging. Our troops know that we have to leave that. We have to transition out. But as I told President Karzai also, we didn't come here, and we're not sitting here 10 years, so that when we leave, women return to the subjugated position they were in under the Taliban. So the answer to that is women must be at the table when you have the negotiations for reconciliation of the leadership of the Taliban, reintegration of rank-and-file members of the Taliban as we move toward more stability in Afghanistan. Women must play a role. Women in America, women throughout the world care about how this all turns out there. So here we are, almost 10 years later, in a situation where we just want to have some management of this issue. Let's have a plan for how the negotiations will take place. Let's have a plan after we see the national intelligence estimate based on what the al-Qaeda threat is. This is a very wise amendment. I thank Mr. McGovern and Mr. Jones for how they put it together, because it's very reasonable. It has a goal in sight. It has a reasonable approach as to how we get there. But make no mistake, in overwhelming numbers, the American people think we have done our job there in terms of helping the Afghan people. Our purpose there was to protect the American people. We can do both by focusing more on the civilian side of governance issues, on how Afghanistan is governed, on anti-corruption issues, and the initiatives that I have seen there on this recent trip are an improvement over the past, by training the national security forces of Afghanistan, be it police or the military, so they can maintain their own security, and by diplomatically enlisting other countries in the region, because they all have this interest in the stability of Afghanistan. But an open-ended, unending war there, which in the cost is, there's nothing to compare to the cost of the loss of our young men and women. So that's first and foremost what our concern is. But also the cost in dollars, the cost in opportunity, the cost in military strength. This engagement in Afghanistan is not strengthening our military. So Americans are paying a big price there. We want to make sure we're getting a return on that investment, and time is a very important factor. It's time for our troops to come home. And I thank Mr. McGovern and Mr. Jones for their leadership, and yield back the balance of our time.
A gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, might I inquire, as the